Hi, I'm Christy Doan, and I will be your facilitator for this course, Psychological First Aid, an overview for non-behavioral health responders. This online course is not intended to take the place of the full psychological first aid training and does not certify anyone as a PFA responder. It's important for everyone to understand the basics of PFA and how to support someone in the field to get connected with the right person or type of volunteer. Many of these skills are important for building resiliency in yourself and teammates as well. If you think about what first aid typically is, what goes into the process of it, and how you determine if someone needs it, things like determining the severity of an injury, using items like bandages or creams to temporarily support healing, and a stopgap measure are things that might come to mind. Psychological first aid is similar. It can be a little harder to figure out since it doesn't have characteristics like blood, a cut, or a physical injury, but there are physical symptoms that you can notice. We are talking about the body's stress response and what happens when we experience it. The definition we use in PFA for stress is fear. There are many different types of situations that can cause fear or stress for the people you are encountering during a disaster response. Things like being told they have to isolate or quarantine means a person can't work or make a living. Concerns around confidentiality or privacy, getting seriously ill or dying, unable to find their family or pets, or concerns about their physical home and safety can cause strong emotional reactions. The picture of the brain on the screen gives you a visual of the main structures of the human brain. For our learning today, it's important to see that the frontal lobe, which is located at the top front part of the brain, the part that takes up the most space behind your forehead, is all about the ability to reason, control your muscles, emotions, and the use of language. The hindbrain or reptilian brain, which includes the upper part of the spinal cord and the brain stem, and the cerebellum, which is home to our basic bodily functions, like breathing, body temperature, and heart rate, and the limbic system, which is our emotional, stress, and memory center. I like this simple visual when thinking about how a brain functions and responds to a traumatic event. Think of the brain like a fist. Okay? The wrist is the spinal cord. The thumb tucked into the palm is the limbic or emotional system, and the rest of the fingers that represent the gray matter, especially the frontal lobe and what is called executive functioning, which is that ability to think through a problem, make decisions, use logic, right? All of that covers your limbic system. So when a brain is functioning normally, the four fingers cover the limbic system, and a person is able to take in information and respond using context clues, previous experiences, and rational judgment. However, when that person experiences a traumatic event, their brain could experience a stress response that allows the limbic system to take over. This is a natural response to an unnatural event. Essentially, the brain pops its top. That person temporarily loses their ability to rationalize, make decisions. They may also lose some motor functioning and the ability to speak as well. There are 4 different types of stress responses. And they all start with the letter F for easy remembering. Each of these is a normal response, and people may have one type of response that is dominant or may have different responses based on the situation. Each of these responses is intended to support the person in addressing the threat that their brain has identified. I bet you've heard of 3 of them, and I may be introducing you to a new 4th one. The first F is for fight. This response engages a person's aggression reaction, which can be verbal or physical. This can show up as someone who is able to lift a car off another person with almost superhuman strength, or as an angry verbal response to others in their surroundings. The second F is for flight. This response engages a person's escape reaction, which often shows up as someone running away from a traumatic situation. For example, someone hearing gunshots at a mall and running away from the noise, even if it means leaving their child standing in the same spot. Remember that these are split-second brain responses that don't allow for the rational part of the brain to kick in. The third F is for freeze. This response engages a person's hide reaction and can show up both physically and mentally. Someone who is unable to respond during an argument loses the capacity for thought and language, or who physically cannot run away. They seem frozen in place during an active shooter situation at work, are examples of this response. The final F is for friend. This response engages our basic need for connection and safety in numbers. You can see this when people run towards others to assist them during a disaster. Our brain is wired for connection, and this is a big part of what psychological first aid is based on. Remember that all of these reactions are meant to help us survive. You see similar reactions in other animals like cats, bunnies, deer, and fish. In certain life or death situations, these responses have a practical purpose. They cause us to react, so we have an increased chance of survival. The purpose of disaster behavioral health is to support a person in lowering their stress to increase their own functioning. Essentially, we want to help the brain kick in its executive functioning back into gear and put that limbic system back under control. There are 5 psychological first aid principles to consider: safety, calming, connectedness, self and community efficacy, and hope. Each of these principles is woven through the 9 core actions of psychological first aid, which we will cover next. The 9 core actions are taught using words and pictures to describe each one and can be depicted in a 3x3 table like this. I encourage you to draw your own 3x3 table and fill in the squares with the core actions after watching each video.